Hi, everyone. This is Scott Baradell. I'm with Idea Grove, and we work closely with Big Lever, which is a pioneer leader in the field of product line engineering, which is a fascinating topic. And we're going to explore some aspects of it today. And we have with us Charlie Krueger, who is the founder and CEO of Big Lever, one of the leaders for years in developing and advancing PLE. So thank you for joining us, Charlie.
Hi, Scott. Thanks. Great to be here.
So today we thought we would dive into a little history, a little psychology. Um, you know, Sometimes people think engineers only think about math, but we'll think about some, liberal arts today because I'm a liberal arts guy. And one thing that I we had talked about in the past I thought was interesting was if you look at the concept of product line engineering and what that's really about and the benefits that it delivers, you can go back and trace some aspects of that back 2,200 years ago to what was the known as the became known as the Terracotta Army, which was an emperor of China at that time had conscripted 700,000 people over the course of his life to build this massive mausoleum for when he died. And it was not discovered until the 1970s. And it was discovered that there were 8,000 terracotta, which is, I guess, a form of ceramic, soldiers. And what was interesting about them was, well, I'm telling the whole story. What was interesting about them, Charlie?
Well, what's interesting and why this sometimes comes up in conversations about product lines, we always are searching for when was the first time, somebody built a product line or a product family. And this is kind of one that we've identified as maybe as far back as we've found a product line yet. So what's interesting, of course, about any product line is there's some things about it where there's commonality, right? There's parts of this family of systems or products that we're building, and you can tell are part of a family because there's similarity there, but they're also unique and each one has variation. And so the way this terracotta army was built, you can imagine the first conversation with the emperor is, yeah, we'll mold you 8,000 exactly the same soldiers. And it was like, emperor not pleased. And so what happened is, they actually found a way of producing these soldiers where it represented rank and different variations of uniforms and weapons, all built off of a common frame, but they would layer in options and variants so that ultimately you had a lot of what looked like a real army with all the diversity of all the people, different ranks and different positions and different weapons they would use in the army. So this is a great example. It was an engineering challenge. It took 40 years to construct this army, right? And so somebody was doing a lot of how can we not have to create each one of these from scratch. We're going to do something so that we can produce 8,000, but they have to be uniquely, options and variants of uniforms all the way down to belt buckles. They had different belt buckles that would go on these uniforms. So, we say, well, that represents this sort of human characteristic of let's produce, wide variety of things, but still take advantage of something common that allows us to more efficiently and effectively produce them. So anyway, great example of that concept of engineering a family of products.
Mm-hmm. And you could argue that obviously this emperor was probably some kind of megalomaniac or something along those lines. Maybe just that just happens to everyone who's put in charge of millions of people. But I guess you know we all kind of like to feel special by having things customized just for us, right?
I think it's a human characteristic, and we often think that's why we're in business, right? And so one example, sometimes you'll pull into a neighborhood somewhere and the houses look like they're almost the same, and that's disturbing, right? So we don't like that cookie cutter. I don't want to be exactly like, I don't want my house to be exactly like my neighbor's. Back in the early days of producing cars, right? It was the exact same thing over and over and over again. Fairly quickly, humans, you know, are disturbed by that. It's like, no, I want my car to be unique. I've got something unique about it that this one of a kind thing just doesn't suit my purpose. So I think there's something very human about wanting to differentiate, distinguish, um, come up with something that is uniquely tailored to my needs and my tastes.
And of course, 2,000 years ago, if you were an emperor, you could get 700,000 people against their will to help you do that. But today, we obviously, I guess, have to use technology or find smarter ways to be able to scale a business, scale an industry, and yet still provide this level of personalization.
Right. So, a lot of what has happened, even since the sort of the emergence of the industrial era, when some of this mass production started occurring, and then people began looking for, again, don't give me the same Model A painted black, exact same everything. Let's produce variety. And sometimes it's not just, sort of arbitrary. People need maybe a bigger car because they have a bigger family, or they want a smaller car, or they need to tow something behind their vehicle. And so these are real utilitarian needs reflecting the unique situation for every individual, as well as, I love loud music in my car, so let me buy the expensive stereo and I'll pay extra for that to get a really good sound system in my car. So I think as you know, the various fields, disciplines evolve, if you're making airplanes, it's not about individual preferences. It's about how can I make more money? Build me a airplane, small one, medium one, big ones, so that I can fly into different markets that may be larger or smaller. So there's lots of reasons that drive this need in the industry. And again, we saw this emerging since the beginning of the industrial um, revolution. But now we're in that digital era, and it makes it so much easier to add software features and behavioral features and uh, characteristics that are derived from electronics and software, and that are were much harder to do when we were just doing pure mechanical systems and variations. It's now possible to do so much more.
Um, we, I know that when Google started in the 90s, the founder's ambition, I think the Google was play off of, if I'm pronouncing it right, I'm sure you know this, is it a Google, Googol? You know what I'm talking about? Like it's a number. It's like this massive number, right? That represented billions, and somewhere in the billions
Okay.
of websites that they wanted to
Okay.
index, and they haven't quite made it to that number, but they're getting there little by little. And if you look at the audiences, the size of audiences that a Netflix serves, or all the customers that Amazon has today, these massive companies, and yet one of the biggest features of a Google search experience, or uh, choosing a movie to watch on Netflix or shopping with Amazon is all the work and technology that's gone into making everyone feel like they're having an individualized experience. We were talking about it earlier. You mentioned an example of ice cream and how that could be an analogy for kind of what's how you get to kind of an infinite number of choices.
Yeah, the what we call in mathematics the combinatorics of product lines, supporting variation within products, it explodes in surprisingly quick sorts of ways, right? So with ice cream, what we're saying is you start with a base blob of vanilla ice cream, and then if I have 32 different mix-ins in my little container behind the ice cream shop
So
glass.
So we've got cherries and chocolate syrup and coconut and nuts and et cetera, et cetera. So 32,
Okay,
32 of those toppings.
32 possible different add-ins into my vanilla ice cream. So how many different ice cream cones can I produce if I have vanilla ice cream plus 32 of these little mix-ins that I can add as many as I want? I can add 0, have a vanilla ice cream, or I can add them all and have a 32 flavor mix-in, ice cream. So if you look at then all the combinations in between, you can, if you're a math student, you can do the math. That would be a choice of yes or no 32 times. That's equal to basically the number of humans on the planet. I can create a unique ice cream flavor for 7 to 8 billion peoples if I only have 32, 33 of these different mix-ins. And that's a surprising number, right?
Yeah.
And so for ice cream, no big deal. But if I'm building a product and all of a sudden now I have to build and maintain a unique product that's maybe physical or mechanical or electrical, and if I end up with 8 billion different products I have to sell and maintain and understand what they do and how things interact, that becomes really hard. So even with a small number of choices and variations within a product, that number explodes in a hurry. And so it's not unusual in this world of software. We see these cases where there might be thousands of variants within something like an automotive set of different subsystems. Well, even if I only have 280 choices of things that could vary, yes or no, I want that or not. With 280 choices, I can create something unique for every atom in the universe. That's only 280 choices. That equates to a unique configuration for every atom in the universe. So it's like, all right, then you begin to understand why in this world of, product lines, product families, be they physical or, built with electrical or software systems that introduce variation. Engineers' jobs can get really quickly complex in a hurry.
Yeah, and I think there are examples. I think I was reading some case studies on your website where there are industries where literally there are thousands or even millions of variations. What would be an example of an industry where there's just an astounding number of possible variations that a lot of people would be surprised by?
Yeah, the one that we work in and that I just find most intriguing and compelling because it's the biggest, hardest product line problem in the world these days is what they are attempting in the automotive industry. So if you look across the industry, I think the number a few years ago, I'm not sure what it was during COVID when we're having all these problems, but the industry was producing 70 million new cars per year. it's like, oh my gosh, where do all those cars go? I think they all pull out of the factory onto the LA freeway or something. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of cars. So that's one every 2 seconds. So imagine every 2 seconds, there's a car rolling off of a factory line somewhere. And just with all the options and variants now that are possible there, maybe trivial ones would be things like paint. I can paint it this color or paint it that color. I can choose this, rim or that rim for my wheels. But it's, not unusual as we're doing the work, if we go down to the lowest level where, the group building the steering system, the group building the braking system, the group building, the windshield wipers. Each of those has variation built into it. And so if you look across the entire car and add up, all the variations, choices within those low-level subsystems, that can be on the order of 10,000. And remember, I said all it takes is 280 to reach the number of atoms in the universe. So managing the variation in that world is just a very fascinating challenge. And a lot of what we do and how we help the automotive industry is, like one of my architects in one of the automotive companies used to say, we don't talk about the things that we want on a car. We talk about the things that we don't want, right? How can we eliminate all these, thousands of possibilities and narrow it down to, give me 10 choices, not 10,000 choices on a particular model when a customer can actually pick and choose what they want. So it's a really, really interesting problem of just constraining, controlling, containing, limiting, doing market studies to say what are the variations that actually matter to a customer that ultimately will allow this car company to, produce enough variation to make the most money that's possible. Too much variation is too expensive, not enough variation, people aren't happy, and they'll go to the next car company to find something more compelling and interesting.
But that's fascinating, but I think about it as the consumer, and I am not and have never been a car person. But one thing that has always frustrated me about cars is I always thought there should be more color choices. I feel like I get on every car looks like mine. Why is everything white, gray, or black? Why
Right.
can't there be a dozen different colors? Why can't I choose purple or something? And then I've gotten so annoyed by it in the past that I looked into custom paint jobs, and they're so expensive that I never did it. But I just what would it do? I know you don't have your calculator, but if you took your typical car maker and they decided to have a dozen different color variations they sold as opposed to 4 or 5 or whatever they mostly sell now. I'm not sure, maybe 6. It's usually not more than that, right? If they doubled or tripled that, what would that do? Would they suddenly be like the ice cream with the 32 variations? Would it just blow things up?
Yeah, it's I'm guessing. I'm just guessing, not an expert, so I'll just make something up here. So one is you've got these paint rooms. These days are very very much robotic, automated. You just shells come through the skin of the car, and these robots paint them. Well, if I just painted a white car and now I want a purple car, I got to flush out all of my the lines, and I don't want my next car to have a little bit of purple in it, right? It's got to be pure whatever. So probably the cost of changing from this color to this color to this color, I'm sure they produce a huge batch of red cars and then they produce a huge batch of black cars as they're doing the painting, right? That part of the process. They're trying to simplify that. So if you could come up with a great way to say, yeah, we can support changing paint color in our automated painting systems in a way that doesn't waste a lot of time or space or paint or whatever, they'd probably do it. But then the question is, well, how many purple cars are we going to sell, right? So Scott wants one.
At least one. And we were talking about how everyone is special. So, but so I guess that speaks to how there's a big difference, even with all of the technology behind it, between kind of physical products and digital products, software, digital artifacts. Because of course, I can be in software and an app or something, and you can have the choice to make the background or the wallpaper, whatever, any color under the sun, right? Because you don't have that mechanical piece that kind of bogs things down.
Exactly. Yeah, the digital world is very, very soft, very malleable, very quick to change. And so the fact that I can quickly, add new capabilities, to a product line through just changing software a little bit. What that also means is I can very quickly go in and introduce a bug, and then your app doesn't work anymore. And I can do that to 1 million people by making one little mistake. So it's fast, it's easy to add new capability. It's equally fast to create a disaster. And so that's part of the challenge in this world of soft engineered artifacts that take the form of bits and bytes in software, in documents, in displays, things like that.
What's from an engineer's perspective and how engineers think about their jobs and do their jobs? As if things have become more from atoms to bits and bytes, from the material world to the digital world, what has been the biggest change or transition that engineers have made in terms of how they approach their work?
So I remember, I grew up in this era when all of a sudden, you had computers. They were the size of refrigerators, but they could do what your, calculator, handheld calculator can do today. But in the early days, that was fun, and we created, custom software to do things, and so make the computer do the work, so I don't have to. Good lazy engineers are the best. They create systems to put themselves out of a job. But what's happened, then move forward multiple decades, and it becomes more efficient. People are looking, I'll say companies are looking for ways where we don't have to create, these custom programs one after the other over and over. So early on, back in the 60s, there was a push to do what was called software reuse. What if I could save all that work I did to create my mathematical routine for, plotting out sine waves on a graph or putting those into a machine somewhere? What if I could take that work I did, store it, and the next person that needs a sine wave generating software, they just grab that and off they go. So then became a huge effort to create reusable software, and there was some good success, but it was limited to small things, because once you get larger programs, the odds of me being able to reuse something that you wrote last year kind of, there are reasons, but it was very small. You created it in the context of a particular need, and my need is different. And so ultimately that idea of then reusing, taking advantage of work that people have done previously, that turned into this field we now know as product line engineering. We want to be able to share and reuse work, but do it in a way that doesn't rely on what you built is exactly the same as what I need now. We can think back to Terracotta Army. Well, what that sounds like is there's something that's common about what you built and what I might want to reuse, but there's also variation, right? So how can we take advantage of what's common and yet manage the variation across our 8,000 Terracotta Army soldiers? And so ultimately, again, that human characteristic and desire to have, not do the same repetitive work, that's something that engineers do hate today. If you make me do the same change on 10 similar things, I hate that as an
Right.
engineer. Low value, repetitive, redundant work. What I would love to do is, fix it once, have it spread across the 10 copies automatically, and then deal with variation and unique configurations and high value new capabilities. So that's what we're seeing in the world of software engineering, digital transformation is, let's reuse what we can, take advantage of commonalities, share effort across, multiple similar things while still producing, 8,000 unique members of my software equivalent of the Terracotta Army.
Yeah, without having to use 700,000 conscripted
Right.
workers. There's there's a term that emerged in the 90s, became popular in the 90s, mass customization.
Uh-huh.
I guess Dell made it famous with all the different variations of Dell computers that you could purchase. But how does mass customization relate to PLE? Is product line engineering a form of mass customization, or how do they relate?
Yeah, that's very very relevant topic. So when I did my thesis work, which was the foundation of the company here, we really didn't have a name for what we were doing. It was related to this notion of reuse that I described, but it dealt with the variations, all those little things that make, members of a family of systems unique. So I adopted that term actually at the early days here at Big Lever. We used to call our product and our methodology and our approach a mass customization for software systems. So again, the mass relates to mass production. In the early days of industrial era, you produced the same thing exactly over and over and over again. You got very efficient with the automation of industry. The customization means I don't want, to buy the exact same thing that everybody else has. I need it to be a little bit unique and different to meet my needs and my preferences and my desires. And so that's where the customization comes in. So how can you build a large product line for a large set of customers that's, produces these things that are mass produced, almost the same, and yet they're different, they're mass customized. So mass customization, it's a concept, like you said, came out in the 90s. I think the thought was we can produce our blue jeans and our sunglasses and our shirts and our shoes. Everybody can, go online like you used to do with your Dell and pick all the pieces and parts of your computer. That really hasn't materialized yet. I think it was a little beyond maybe what human desire or what automation could deal with, but we'll see. It's a concept that comes up still regularly in the context of many industries. I want to uniquely configure my thing, sort of like the ice cream example. Every human on the planet wants a unique combination of flavors, so let people have at it.
Well, if you look at examples like Amazon and Netflix and just kind of how retargeting ads and things kind of follow you around, and everything's you see on Instagram and all the algorithms, everything's so personalized. Then like for the retail offers and things you get online, and then you go to the retail store and you're like, wait a minute, you don't have the kind I want, because they physically can't stock everything, right? It's like they
Right.
talk about the long tail of
Yeah.
products online versus what you could have at physical retail. So it's interesting. I would suspect, in terms of what people want, that this, what happens in the digital world drives people what their desires are in the physical world. So I wonder if at some point what you're describing, there's going to be such a demand for that this kind of vision of mass customization, to the extent that perhaps it's impractical now or costs too much, maybe it's something that gets figured out just because there's such a demand for it.
Right. Yeah, you can even see cultural differences. So the way people buy cars in the US, they tend to wake up some morning and say, I'm going to go buy a new car. And so they go to the lot and they'll buy what's
On the
there.
lot,
Very, very, sort of uh,
like
immediate,
like an
you know,
impulse purchase, immediate gratification, right?
immediate gratification, impulse buying, whatever. But in other parts, Europe, I think, for example, some parts there, people do sit down and, like their Dell computer, they'll pick and choose the paint and the rims and the options and how many doors, what engine configuration do they want, what exhaust configuration do they want. So they get to make all these choices. Some of the high-end car companies will say, we've never shipped exactly the same car to anybody, because we give them these choices, everybody uniquely configures. And so that's a real example of mass customization in the high-end
Mhm.
automotive markets. And you just give people enough choices. Again, it's not that much. Give me 32 choices. Um, and I can create something that unique that nobody else in the world is going to have. Whereas if I walk up to a car lot, I'm being much less discriminating. It's like whatever got shipped out here last week is good enough, and that's okay. You still see a lot of diversity there,
Mhm.
but it's kind of like you say, it's the walking in the store and buying from what's there versus sitting back and truly creating your mass customized
Experience.
of what you want. Yeah.
Um, I'll wrap a bow on the conversation, and we've gone for about a half hour, and it's a fascinating topic. We've talked about, from the Terracotta Army to Dell computers and auto industry. If you look at kind of this human desire to have something that's uniquely theirs, and how it's evolved, what would you say is the specific insight or innovation or advancement that PLE brings to the table, and kind of the forward progress of humanity, in a way, in terms of how the technology and the concept advances the human experience?
Yeah. So I think the thing that we see here is this evolution from reuse. I want to reuse something I've done before, and or that somebody else has done before. I want to do that so I don't have to reinvent it from scratch. What we do now is this notion of sharing. So sharing is an evolution of the concept of reuse. So if I have these digital artifacts and they get used in hundreds of different configurations of I'll say my electronic steering in my car, or some autonomous driving capability. If I have a lot of different configurations, but if I can make a change once in my digital artifact, something in source code maybe, that can be automatically propagated instead of having my 700,000 specialists going in and making that change to all of my replicated copies. So I think the
Mhm.
digital era, the modern version of product line engineering, is taking away the tedium and the repetitiveness of what we've traditionally seen have to happen in the mechanical and the previous history from 2,200 years ago until recently. we're now able to take this repetitive, mundane work away from the artists and the engineers so that they can do creative and innovative things rather than repetitive. That has really been a breakthrough and a game-changing event in history. So
Well,
that product line's contribution.
you played a part in making a lot of engineers happier, among other things. That's good. Well, this has been a great a conversation. It's a great topic. It really kind of shows that technologies like this that may seem arcane to people, or it's very B2B or enterprise. If you take a few steps back, it's always going to relate to basic human desires and yearnings, and the technology is what ultimately results from that.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, thanks, Charlie. I appreciate it. It's been a great talk, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. It's been fun. Thank you. Bye.